12,000 years ago, people were struggling to survive. They were all the time busy hunting and looking for a safe place to get some sleep. They didn't think about the future. They didn't change the world. But one day, everything changed. They built something unthinkable for that time. And then, they hit it. Today, this place has opened up to us again, by accident. Buried in secrets, it immediately raises questions. How? Why? And what for? The mystery of Gobekli Tepe. Southeastern Turkey, 10 kilometers from the ancient city of Urfa, a hill amidst the pastures. Local shepherds believe there's nothing remarkable here, just an ordinary piece of land for grazing flocks. But wait, right here, strange stone blocks protrude from the ground. This is Gobekli Tepe, which translates from Turkish as Potbelly Hill. A massive megalithic structure over 10,000 years old. And do you know how it was discovered? Almost by chance. In 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt noticed these blocks while surveying the area. At first glance, they seemed like ordinary stones. They had been spotted back in 1963, but no one paid them any real attention. Yet, Schmidt sensed something more. Later, he admitted, "The moment I saw these stones, I realized, if I walked away now, I would remain a fool. This place would never leave me." And he was right. It soon became clear Gobekli Tepe was not just a random find. This complex predates any known temple or most other ancient structures. But how? Think about it. 10,000 years ago, humans were hunter-gatherers. They had no cities, no writing. They hadn't even invented the wheel yet. They barely knew how to survive, let alone build something so monumental. Now imagine giant stone pillars, each weighing 10 to 20 tons, standing in perfect circles and adorned with carvings. Everything was crafted as if these people had a clear plan, excellent tools, and advanced engineering knowledge. How is that possible? Gobekli Tepe contradicts everything we know about the development of civilization. It completely changes our understanding of history. How did people with the most primitive tools manage to build such an astonishingly massive structure? And why? The age of Gobekli Tepe was determined using radiocarbon dating, the most accurate method for dating organic materials. Here's what researchers discovered. This complex was built around 9600 BC. This means the site is nearly 12,000 years old. It predates the Egyptian pyramids by 7,000 years, and Stonehenge by about 8,000 years. But wait, what do we know about that time? It was an extremely harsh era. The world was just beginning to recover from the Ice Age, and the climate conditions were, frankly, far from ideal. According to conventional archaeology, people at that time lived exclusively as nomads, gathering wild plants and hunting animals. They had very basic tools, primarily sharp stone pieces. Back then, agriculture and a settled way of life were out of the question. At best, people lived in shelters made of branches and bones, or in caves. The people of that time didn't construct massive stone structures. They lacked the knowledge, tools, and experience required for such monumental projects. All of these came later, with the advent of agriculture. And yet, there it stood. Even a single glance at the columns of Gobekli Tepe is enough to make one question everything. Just think about it. Hunter-gatherers who hadn't even mastered agriculture suddenly produced something so sophisticated and large-scale. Where did they get such knowledge? It's not just their astonishing engineering skills that are remarkable, and you'll soon understand why. The complex consists of 4 enormous circular structures, with their diameters ranging from 10 to 30 meters. Every circle is surrounded by walls constructed from small limestone pieces. Massive T-shaped pillars stand inside these circles. The 2 largest columns in the center are 5 to 6 meters tall and weigh up to 20 tons each, with smaller ones standing along the perimeter. These walls are not merely decorative, they enclose the space, turning each circle into an isolated sanctuary. The total area of the complex spans 8 hectares or 20 acres. Soil scans reveal that there are 16 more circles underground. At every enclosure, a number of 12 megalithic pillars can be expected. So, in total, one can count more than 200 pillars. The arrangement of these circles is far from random. According to some hypotheses, they are specifically aligned with the rising points of Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. This suggests that the hunter-gatherers who built Gobekli Tepe tracked the movements of celestial bodies, calculated their appearances, and attached great importance to them. As the position of the star in the sky changed over the years, the builders erected new circles oriented towards the new rising point. They continued this practice for 1,500 years. Yes, Gobekli Tepe was a construction project of the millennium. Imagine humanity working on a single structure from the year 500 AD to the present day. It's hard to wrap your mind around this, isn't it? Many ancient structures across various cultures were later built following the same principle, aligned with Sirius, the brightest star. But those structures were created much later by civilizations we already know about, not 12,000 years ago by a society that only knew how to hunt animals and gather edible plants. And yet, there it stood. Basic skills were clearly not enough to build something as grand as Gobekli Tepe. It required knowledge of astronomy to align the structures with the stars and mathematics to calculate dimensions and proportions. But even more astounding is the scale of the construction. It suggests an incredible labor organization. Countless people had to work together, each performing strictly defined tasks. Such coordination is only possible in a society with clearly distributed roles. It's traditionally believed that hunter-gatherers neither possessed such knowledge nor such organization. All this came much later, and yet, there it stood. But this isn't the only detail that suggests there's more we don't know about our ancestors. Massive multi-ton blocks stand inside the circles, their surfaces astonishingly smooth, as if they were created by modern craftsmen with state-of-the-art equipment. The minimum weight of the columns along the walls of the circles is approximately 6 to 10 tons. Even assuming that hunter-gatherers had some knowledge 12,000 years ago, how could they possibly have managed such enormous stone blocks without cranes? Let's recall Stonehenge. It was built by agricultural societies that had already been familiar with techniques for processing and transporting materials for thousands of years. And then there's the Great Pyramid of Giza, composed of over 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing more than 2.5 tons. It was built by the most advanced civilization of its time, thousands of years later. But as we know, the architects of Gobekli Tepe were not farmers, but hunter-gatherers who did not possess advanced knowledge. They had only simple tools like flint chisels, hammers, and cutting tools. Traces of these tools have been found on the surfaces of the columns, which are surprisingly smooth. The builders manually carved all the reliefs and leveled the surfaces of the blocks using these rudimentary tools, millimeter by millimeter, year after year. How were the building blocks for the columns transported here? There is still no definitive answer. Yes, limestone quarries were located near Gobekli Tepe, but that hardly made the task easier. Some researchers suggest the blocks were rolled on wooden logs. Another theory proposes that the ancient people had already developed a complex system of ropes and levers. To erect the columns, they likely built earthen ramps which allowed them to lift and position the blocks on top of each other. This technique was later used in the construction of other ancient structures, such as Stonehenge. Yet, in the case of Gobekli Tepe, it remains unclear how these ancient builders managed to precisely position and align the multi-ton columns without a single crane. And yet, there it stood. There's something very peculiar about these stone pillars. They feature strange carvings depicting individual animals and, in some cases, entire scenes. The T-shaped pillars themselves most likely symbolized humans or gods. The top part of the pillar represents the head, and the lower part the torso. This theory is supported by the fact that some blocks, such as pillar number 18, clearly display carvings of hands and fingers. It all seems as though it was made by quite modern craftsmen, using quite modern tools. Now, take a closer look at pillar number 10, featuring a fox figure over 1 meter, 3.5 feet in size. How remarkable is this 12,000-year-old creation? Then there's pillar number 12, which depicts geese and a boar, and the relief of a predator, likely a felid, hunting a boar on pillar number 27. Amazing animal statues have also been found at the site. Here are, for instance, some boar-shaped sculptures, and here we see a head of an animal. But the builders of Gobekli Tepe did not only depict animals. Among the discoveries was a limestone head, clearly showing human facial features. This might be one of the earliest known life-size sculptures of a human head. Another similar find is a sculpture of a human figure with hands clasped on the stomach. One more intriguing detail about the complex is its polished limestone floor, reminiscent of modern terrazzo. This technique was used thousands of years later in ancient Rome. Let us remind you one more time. All this artistry is over 10,000 years old. It was created before the advent of writing, and yet, there it stood. Speaking of which, some researchers speculate that writing itself may have originated here. Yes, you heard that right. The pillars at Gobekli Tepe feature symbols that could represent the first words in the history of civilization. For instance, on pillar number 18, there is a symbol resembling the letter H between two semicircles. This symbol is almost identical to a Luwian hieroglyph from the Bronze Age that represented God. A number of archaeologists suggest that these signs might have had a sacred meaning. They might have symbolized a transition between worlds or been early attempts to record abstract concepts such as a deity or the afterlife. What's even more astonishing is that the most intricate carvings are found on the oldest pillars. It seems as though ancient people experienced a sudden surge of knowledge and erected the first circle. But then, the builders' relentless energy seemed to dwindle. The scale of construction gradually diminished, and the carvings became increasingly simple. It's as if people lost some of the knowledge their predecessors had. It seemed everything should have been the other way around. However, one thing is certain. For the hunter-gatherers, Gobekli Tepe was a place of extraordinary importance. But why did they build it? Could this complex be the result of knowledge that was passed on to them? The first idea that comes to mind is that Gobekli Tepe might have been an ancient observatory. We've already mentioned that the four circular structures are aligned with the rising point of Sirius, and as this star shifted, new circles were constructed. This theory seems to make a lot of sense. However, Klaus Schmidt, who was in charge of the excavations, believed otherwise. In his opinion, Gobekli Tepe was the first temple, a place for rituals and religious ceremonies. This turned the conventional understanding on its head. Organized religion did not arise because of agriculture. In fact, it was the other way around. Schmidt argued that the desire to gather here for rituals pushed people towards a settled way of life and the development of farming. The spiritual significance is also suggested by the columns of the complex, covered with animal figures. These carvings may have represented totems symbolizing the power and dangers of the surrounding world, or served as protective charms. Even more mysterious are the depictions of vultures next to beheaded bodies. These scenes may have symbolized the soul's journey to the afterlife. Other findings also point to the sacred nature of this place. For example, stone basins with traces of grain suggest they might have been used to brew beer, which played a key role in rituals. Perhaps these traces also suggest that agriculture may have originated here. But if this site was so important, why was it suddenly buried? What were these people trying to preserve or hide? We already know that back then it required an extraordinary effort to construct this complex, and now it turns out it was deliberately buried? Klaus Schmidt first proposed this hypothesis. In his view, Gobekli Tepe was symbolically sealed by its creators. This act may have been their final ritual. It's as though they completed their mission here, buried their sacred site, and abandoned it forever. Or perhaps they wished to preserve it for future generations. However, not everyone agrees with these theories. Some scientific evidence points to natural causes that might have buried the site, such as erosion, landslides, and climate change, which would be plausible for a structure located on such a hill. Still, many consider Gobekli Tepe a kind of time capsule, a message for future generations. But the question remains, who could have left such a warning? Naturally, this leads to an obvious theory. Could Gobekli Tepe have been built with the help of an unknown civilization? The sheer scale of this construction certainly fuels the boldest hypotheses. Some researchers believe that during the Ice Age, there was another, more advanced civilization that managed to pass on knowledge of engineering, astronomy, and mathematics to a group of hunter-gatherers. According to this theory, the structure itself is a kind of time capsule with a prophecy. But what were the builders of Gobekli Tepe trying to warn us about? It seems we might have access to this prophecy. One can find it on Pillar 43, also known as the Vulture Stone. Perhaps these traces also suggest that agriculture may have originated here. And here's the most surprising part. Some researchers suggest that this might be a calendar, but not the kind we are accustomed to. The stone clearly displays an image of a scorpion, which, according to some theories, represents the constellation Scorpius. At the center of the composition, there is a prominent circle, likely symbolizing the sun. Other carvings on the stone also correspond to constellations. Researchers have determined the period in history when these constellations might have appeared in the sky in the same arrangement depicted on the pillar. It turned out that this star configuration could have been observed from Gobekli Tepe only within a narrow time window, between 10,900 and 10,800 BC, approximately 13,000 years ago. But here's the kicker: this is 1,000 years older than the complex itself. Most likely, this carving recorded something very important: the end of the last ice age and a sharp climate shift known as the Younger Dryas. One hypothesis suggests that this abrupt warming triggered global catastrophes, which left very few survivors. Another theory is even more dramatic. This could mark the date of a comet impact that caused these changes. If so, the stone serves as a warning, a message for those who would live after. Something like, "Beware, this could happen again." And yes, it sounds even cooler than the Mayan calendar. But all of this remains just a hypothesis. Like a lot of things about Gobekli Tepe, we still don't know who built it, why, or how they did it. Moreover, only 5% of the complex has been excavated. The remaining 95% is still buried underground, guarding its secrets. But even the structures already unearthed raise countless questions. Why did hunter-gatherers, who had neither cities nor writing, build such a monumental complex? How did they achieve such engineering precision? And why did they bury it, as if sending a message through millennia? A temple, an observatory, a memorial, or a warning? What is it, really? Every answer only brings more questions. Perhaps beneath the layers of Earth lie answers that could revolutionize our understanding of the past. Or perhaps we'll find their secrets that will once again overturn our perception of the world.